Good day, this is Jim Pytel from Columbia Gorge Community College, Renewable Energy Technology Program. This is EET 122, Digital 2. Today we're going to discuss the three basic applications of flip-flops. First one, data storage. Second, frequency division. Third one, counters. When you see data storage, you should be saying, no duh. Frequency division, you should be saying, huh? Counting, no duh. Counting's an extension of memory because it always helps to remember what number you were previously at. So 1, 2, 3, oh, where the heck was I? Let me start over. Yeah, that doesn't work. Okay, let's talk about data storage. So data storage, 1 bit. Yeah, you can already store 1 bit. You should be pretty familiar with a JK flip-flop or a D flip-flop or whatever to store 1 bit. But that's not especially useful. Typically, they're stored in groups of 8 or multiples of 8. Think about your 64-bit system, your 32-bit systems. They're multiples of 8. By the way, in 8 bits, that's 1 byte. 4 bits, that's a nibble. I hate that word. But let's just stick to our 4-bit. We want to store a BCD number because remember, BCD, binary coded decimal, is a 4-bit representation of a binary digit. Okay, so we want to have 4 bits. So let's line up 4 flip-flops. In this case, we're going to use 4 positive edge-triggered D flip-flops. Okay, so what are we going to do? We're going to send our 4 bits, LSB, D0, to our MSB, D3, to the D lines of those individual D flip-flops. And then what are we going to do? We're going to go ahead and clock them all to the same clock. Reason why is you want them to simultaneously store data at the same time. And that's our clock. In this particular case, they're positive edge triggered devices. Basically, all it's saying is when that clock gives a positive edge, D0, D1, D2, and D3 are going to be input and sent to Q, output Q there. Okay, so what you're going to get is, again, if this was LSB to MSB, every time that clock comes in, it's going to store it, and you're going to get LSB to MSB stored in there. Okay, want to make it a little bit fancier? Let's clear them simultaneously. So these are our active low clears, just to make sure that there's no garbage data in there. I'll make that a little bit clearer here. And here's our active low clear. And basically, prior to you sending data to this thing, give it an active low clear signal. Thereby, you're going to have 0, 0, 0, 0. Then the next clock pulse, take away the active low clear. Next clock pulse comes by, then D0, D1, D2, and D3 are stored into the output right here. Okay, let's just draw a quick timing diagram and see what this looks like. Okay, here we go. Here's our timing diagram. I think I should have just stuck with a 2-bit one. This is this is a lot of stuff here. So there's 4 bits, 4-bit register here. Here is our active low clear. Here's our incoming data right here. Here is our clock signal right here. And then here's our outputs, Q0 to Q3. And by the way, that's LSB to MSB. Same thing here, LSB to MSB. And let's say we were previously, whatever happened before, on the outputs, it was a 3. So there it is, 0, 0, 1, 1. And if we read that MSB to LSB, what is that? So it was previously 3, the BCD code for 3. And what we want to do prior to storing anything is get rid of the junk. Give it an active low clear. And then we're just going to keep that high for the rest of the time. So what happens at the output, regardless of what's going on up here at the input? What happens at the output when we receive an active low clear? It clears it. These guys were already clear. So we're starting with a fresh, clean sheet of paper, because remember that active low clear is tied to every single one of these D flip-flops clear. Okay, so let's say we want to store a 4. So D input is 4. What is 4 in BCD? Well, it's 0, 1, 0, 0, and that's MSB to LSB. So what's it going to look like? D0, 0, D1, 0, D2 is a 1, and D3 is a 0. So now on the rising edge of this clock here, we do nothing to the outputs until simultaneously that clock signal hits every single one of these rising edge clock. It says track D right now. What happens is, what's our D? Well, what's our D0? Well, at D0 at this rising clock edge, it's 0. D1, that's also 0. D2, well, that's a 1. D3, that's a 0. Okay? So that's at the rising edge of the clock, and it's stored. What's stored? It's stored 0, 1, 0, 0. We've stored 4, and we're good to go. So now this input can go haywire. It can do whatever it wants to. But what's stored in the output is 4 until you give an active low clear, and then that next active high clock pulse comes along, and then it changes to whatever it was, excuse me, whatever it is at that time. So this is a basic parallel register, i.e. things are coming in parallel on this side and they're coming out parallel on that side. Okay, next basic function of flip-flops, excuse me, basic application of flip-flops is frequency division, and this is very ingenious. So let's say you've got a 30 megahertz signal and you've got another chip maybe whose maximum clock frequency is 15 megahertz. Well, you can use a JK flip-flop to divide the incoming frequency in half by using toggle mode. If you remember right, toggle mode is basically tying both our J's and K's to a 1. And so whatever it was on the Q input, the next rising clock pulse, it switches to the other, whoops, not that, the other input. The next rising edge, it switches to the other input. Okay, so let's draw a timing diagram to see what happens here. So there's our incoming clock signal. And then we've got our Q output. And let's say it's originally reset. And we're in toggle mode. At that positive edge, it switches to 1. We stay at 1. The next positive edge comes along, and we're in toggle mode. And it switches back to 0. And then it switches back to 1 at this edge, and so on and so forth. So what happened here? Well, according to EET 112, that's the period of the clock frequency, where it gets back to where it started. It gets up, it's down, it's back up, back to where it started. That's the time it took. Remember, T, 1 over T is equal to our frequency. So now look what happened here. At our output Q, it started here and it took twice as long, twice as much period, half the frequency. Pretty sweet, huh? So, what if I've got a really slow device? Well, just feed that half frequency, this guy right here, the output Q, into the clock of another JK flip-flop. So what happens there? So here comes the output, which was half frequency of the clock. It's input to this guy's clock. We're also going to keep this guy in toggle mode. So now this one's clock signal is this guy right there. So let's draw the timing diagram of what happens to its output. Let's again assume that it was in reset, and in reset it's 0. Here's its rising edge, and it's in toggle mode, so it switches to 1, and it stays at 1 until the next positive edge, and it toggles back. And it goes on. Let's say this one's right here. I've abandoned any pretense of being accurate at this point too, guys. So what you get is half of this frequency. So let's say you were at 40 megahertz, you're at 20 megahertz, half again, 10 megahertz. Want to go further? Take this guy's Q, feed it into the clock signal of this next JK flip-flop right here, also in toggle mode, and you get something that looks like, again, we're assuming we're in reset. Twice the period, half the frequency, 5 megahertz. Very ingenious. Final basic application of a flip-flop is our counters. Remember, the key to counting is remembering where you were. So let's build a basic 2-bit counter. First off, let's just do a JK flip-flop. And this time, I'm going to make this a negative edge detection device, and that's actually critical to this. And we're going to feed it a clock signal. We are also going to make this in toggle mode. So whatever we feed in here, this clock signal here, it's going to come out half the frequency here, but because it's a negative edge detection device, it's slightly shifted because of the negative edge. Let's draw that. Okay, let's assume Q is initially in the reset mode. So it's 0, and it's going to stay 0 until that negative edge comes along, and it goes up to 1. Next negative edge, it toggles back to 0, toggles back to 1, and so on and so forth. Okay? So half the frequency, and it's shifted over. So it's shifted this way because of that negative edge detection. Okay. Now, let's take a second JK flip-flop. For some reason, I'm drawing it green. And put it right next to this guy. So we're going to take this signal off here. And where's that signal going to go? It's going to go into its negative edge clock. And we're going to keep our J's and our K's still in toggle mode. So recall, what came out of that last one? Well, what came out here was half the frequency slightly shifted because of the negative edge. So what's going to come out here? Well, it's going to be half the frequency of this guy slightly shifted because of the negative edge. So think about this. Where's the negative edge on this? If this is now this one's clock signal. Well, let's just again assume it's in reset. It stays in reset until it toggles at this moment. Toggles at this moment. And now if we are on this edge right here, where this is the LSB and this is the MSB, MSB, LSB, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, back to 0. And if we kept this thing going, 1, and this would actually go back up to 1 right here. What you get is this progression. 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, back to 0, and it counts back. Want a 3-bit counter? Just add another JK flip-flop here. And here we go. Here's our initial clock coming in. And every single one of these JK flip-flops are in toggle mode. Okay, so that's our initial clock coming in. It's negative edge detection. So what's the output of this cue right there? Well, it's again, assuming it's 0 at the initial, at the onset. It's going to be 0 and it's going to toggle at the negative edge. Toggle at the negative edge. Toggle at the negative edge. And so on and so forth. Well, take that signal and put that right there. And that's Q0. So now Q0 is being fed into the input of the second stage JK flip-flop with a negative edge detection, where its negative edge is right there. And again, assuming it was initially reset, toggle, 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 for the heck of it, toggle once more. That's Q1. And because we want a 3-bit counter, we take Q1 and feed it into the clock signal of the third stage negative edge detection JK flip-flop. And what's the output? Q2. What does Q2 look like? Well, it's half the frequency of Q1 shifted. And if you think about this, if this is MSB to LSB, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0. So what you see, this is progression. So now if we were to read this from LSB to MSB, Q0, Q1, Q2, what you get is this interesting phenomenon. 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, and to continue this out, 1, 1, 0, 1. And now what do you get at Q2? 0, 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, And let's keep this going. 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. So what you're doing is counting from 0 to 8, going back to 0, counting from 0 to 7, going back to 0, counting again from 0 to 7. Exactly what we get there. Pretty neat, huh? We want a 4-bit, just keep on adding JK flip-flops where the frequency of, the output of the previous stage is its new clock signal on a negative edge detection device, and take that bit and make that the MSB. Pretty neat, huh?